We are back. 5 weeks on the road for Steve, 2 weeks on the road for me. Conferences through the end of the year, from TravCon all the way through now. We are out of the office a lot. We're going to talk about two of them today. Atlas All Access starts now. Steve Seitner's back with us again. My travel partner for 2 weeks, right?
Roomies.
You've been on the road for 5 weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was with you for 2 of those weeks. Let's start with, one was Staffing World at ASA in Las Vegas.
Yes, sir.
And then we were at SIA in Houston. We're going to start with ASA first. So what do these mean for you? And that's why I've had a couple of you ask me online, like ask me on Facebook, what does this mean for you? And so that's what this is meant to answer. How does all of this, how does me or Steve or whoever going to these conferences, what does that mean for all of you out on a contract? So let's start with ASA, because they are 2 completely different conferences.
They're 2 very different organizations, a lot of the same participants, some of the same topics.
Yep.
But, like a lot of things, you get onto like a sports radio channel and there's an antagonist and a protagonist. There's people who are paid to fight both sides of the fight, talk both sides of the argument too, right?
Yep.
So there's value in going to see both competing brands. Both do a very good job of acknowledging, the effect on the industry today and gives you an outlook as to what the future may hold. Yep. With a little bit of a different angle, I would say, for each of them.
Each one has a different spin based on their position in the industry.
Yeah, very much so.
So let's start. I wrote this down today. ASA, American Staffing Association, founded in 1966. They serve as the voice of staffing, recruiting, and workforce solutions. ASA and its affiliates advance the interests of the industry across sectors throughout advocacy, research, education, and the promotion of high standards of legal, ethical, and professional practices.
Yeah, nailed it. I mean, it's not to put any of it at light, but without question, there's nobody advocating for the staffing arm bigger than ASA is.
Which could come across as very dry sometimes, but it was a very legal kind of viewpoint, right?
Very much so.
What's happening at the state level, what's happening at the federal level for companies like us.
Yeah, and it's not to say that one or the other or both aren't trying to put the same message apart, but this isn't just a 1-week thing for us. We watch this all year long. This is our life. This is how we provide for our families, right? Yeah. So this is at the top of mind when it comes to our lives, our world, our company, right? ASA, like none other, has legislation sitting in D.C. advocating for the best interest of the staffing community. So that doesn't just mean us as a staffing company, but it goes all the way down to the rights and the opportunities and the benefits that our travelers, our employees, are going to end up having exposure to.
That's the thing that kind of stood out for me, because I've been to Staffing World a few times. The flow down to everyone on a contract, right? To everyone working a contract job is, from what they do at the state or federal level is pretty immense. Like what they can control, what they can do at each of those levels has a direct impact on what your contract might look like.
Yeah,
next time around.
You talk about things like nurse wage caps. Being able to stop those. I mean, in what world can you look at a nurse in the face and say that we should limit the amount of compensation they're eligible to earn based on the fact that they're living in one state, or because their job is deemed so important to the health of the nation that they could bankrupt us? I mean, supply and demand. I mean, they're one of the most hero-esque positions out there. How do you sit there and say that they can't make as much as somebody doing another remedial task-based position?
Right. They fought, 14 different states had legislation around it, and capping nurse pay was one of the pieces of that legislation. They fought and won in every one of those 14 states.
They fought and won almost all of them. Some of them have been extended, but the ones that have actually been decided, they've won.
Yes.
The rest of them are still out pending further, I guess, ramifications or alterations to the bill that was proposed.
Doesn't mean they're stopping, though.
No, they're not stopping it. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, I just appreciate their partnership and what they've done for us, because even for the companies that aren't a part of ASA, the fight they're fighting is still to their benefit. So
absolutely.
I think, while I'm not saying it's selfless, it is definitely generous.
Yep. Well, plus it was in Las Vegas this year, and as much as I was just there, you weren't, and it was fun to get back to Las Vegas again, and it was on a different side of the strip than we're normally on, so we had a good time.
Yeah, if we're going to put a little levity to it, Vegas is never a terrible time. Admittedly, as I progress to get a little bit older, my smoke sensitivity gets the better of me. I would say I did not enjoy it as much as I have some of my other trips to Vegas in my lifetime as a 20-something.
Yep.
But Vegas is never a bad time.
I'll tell you, we had some really good food though.
Fantastic food.
Basic food, it was like we found a New York deli. We had some really good food there while we were there. It was a fun time.
Yeah, I think I hit the trifecta: New York hot dog, New York pizza, New York sandwich.
New York deli. Yep,
nailed it.
Oh God, it was good.
Go Jets!
It was so much fun.
All right.
Okay, let's skip ahead to SIA, Staffing Industry Analysts. We go to this conference we go to 2 of them every year. So they do an executive forum every year. That'll be in Miami next year. But this year it was in Houston for healthcare staffing. And I talked about this. You and I might have been here last year at this time talking about this.
This might be our 3rd year in a row.
I think you're probably right. Yes. So Staffing Industry Analysts, founded in 1989, they are proprietary research for the staffing industry.
Very stat heavy.
Absolutely.
Very numbers, very directional offering. It's not necessarily... It's not in the feels, maybe like ASA was in the feels.
Yeah.
This is very number and data-driven conference, and kind of the conference most people within the industry go to look for their outlook next year. Not everybody's a mega company that has access to the amount of data some of the behemoths have. For the rest of us, this conference is an aggregate of a lot of their information along with a lot of our information that we provide to them to get a sum of where we think the industry's going.
Absolutely.
People a lot smarter than us are paid to come up there, look at the numbers, look at the data, lay trend lines over the top of each other and tell us what we can expect for next year. And that's why we go.
Selfishly, we go because all of our friends in the industry are there.
Very much so.
And that's a good connector. Like, we all come back together to, okay, what happened? Where are we going? What are you doing? This is what we are doing, kind of thing.
Very much so. There's a lot of collaboration in the industry.
The value to that is immense.
It shortens the learning curve. I mean, which the benefit, again, goes to all of our travelers. I mean, instead of us having to learn every single lesson by lumps and bumps and all that and scrapes, we can learn it because some other company has been willing to share with us. And, hey, we did that. We thought that. We tried that. We failed. Don't repeat our mistakes.
Don't do that.
And those kind of conversations are very helpful.
Right. Or the flip side is like, oh, my gosh, have you seen this? Like, or have you tried this? No, we haven't even considered that. You should probably try
there's this technology out there, and it has made our nurses' time submittal process immensely easier.
Yep.
Things like that have been big in our 10-year
You should talk to that guy. And then 4 hours later, that guy is there, and you're having a drink with him, at some other meet and greet or whatever. Yeah. It's that quick.
Very much so.
So, okay, so what's your takeaway from SIA? ASA was different. My takeaway from ASA was more, understanding that they're there for us. They're there to lobby for us. That's where I got to go back for a lot of that industry information. What's your takeaway from SIA?
Yeah, I think ASA I look at as this is what's on the horizon, and these are the things you need to plan for, right? Mm-hmm. But SIA is more like, this is what's going to happen. This is what we see what's going to happen. And if you're not already preparing for this, then you're probably behind, right?
Right.
It's no secret the financial stress that's been put on our hospital systems is unlike anything we've ever seen before. I think I saw a stat that more than 50% of the U.S.-based hospitals are operating in the negative. It means they're losing money, right?
Yeah.
And the pressure being put on them to drive bill rates down, which are going to drive compensation down, is somewhat justifiable when you sit there and you see a stat like that. More than half of them are bankrupt. That means the other half probably aren't fancy, right? They're probably not killing it.
Right.
They're probably working pretty close to slim margins, if barely plus, if anything. I think the biggest takeaway is that the opportunity for hospitals, they're not going to be able to be absolved of travelers. They can't wash their hands completely of it. Right. They're trying to get creative. I completely understand that. One of the new in vogue conversations is the multi-site floating positions. It's not unique. There's been a client of ours in Arizona who's been doing it 20 years that I've been in this business. You assign a contract at a home hospital, but you float to 1, 2, 3, or 4 of their other facilities when the need presents itself.
Yeah.
Some of them are trying to manage their plans for 2023 by implementing something similar. You sit there and you see, one nurse, what's their effect? How many beds can they touch? You look in the ICU world, and there's a lot of times that's a 1-to-1, 1-to-2. And I know COVID changed that out of a matter of necessity, but in a world that is not as COVID-based when it comes to hospitalizations as it once was, we are starting to see probably the opportunities for those nurses in positions that touch more patients, the med-surg nurses that are, more comfortable with a 6-to-1, 7-to-1, in some cases 8-to-1 patient load. One nurse coming in and caring for 8 allows them to maybe go out and hire a little bit more of their own 1-to-1, 1-to-2s. The profit centers for hospitals are probably going to be on the big uptick. You're talking about the ORs and the cath lab. And again, it's not secret sauce. Those are just 2 of the very few areas within a hospital that at the end of the year look to be profit centers. That's where they make their money.
Yeah.
It's hard to write off a profession that's one of the few places that's actually bringing money into your doors.
Right.
So we're planning on really beefing up our staff and our support for cath lab and OR, because if we're able to provide those staff to hospitals that's bringing money in the door, it should hopefully help them self-correct and get their internal finances in a better position. So we're thinking med-surg, cath lab, OR are going to be on the uptick.
Absolutely.
On the nursing side.
Yeah.
The ray of sunshine out there is, I guess, as far as opportunity goes, from a seat on this side of the table, is the allied health world. Maybe outside of the therapy, outside of outside of physical, occupational, speech therapy, a lot of the allied professions are maybe on the black side of the ledger board. They're not a loss leader. Right. They are revenue producers. There is expected to be potentially a 30% uptick in allied health needs, allied health resources this year. So we're going to try and capitalize on that. That impact alone, if you can start filling those spots again, has the impact on helping the hospital's bottom line, which should hopefully help a lot of our hospital systems get out of this financial free fall or free spin that they're in right now.
Right. Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. They got to find where they're in the black more than they're in the red.
Yeah.
And that's one thing we heard over and over and over again while we were there.
Very much so.
Which brings me to just my opinion. Now, this is just my opinion. Here, this one's fun because this isn't my opinion. As much as it's my opinion, it's backed up by fact. And Steve talked about it a few times. We heard it. So there was an economist that spoke to us while we were there. She was at SIA. Yeah. Oh my gosh, she was fantastic. Was on Squawk Box. She has on CNBC, which I watch every single morning. She has her own podcast now. She talked about this, and she came out and said, if you're a company, or if you're working for a company that was built over the past 2 years, maybe one of the fastest growing companies, for example, over the past 2 years, built on borrowing money from the bank, you're in a lot of trouble. Like if you were built on that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more important than ever to understand the history of the company you're working for.
Yep.
We did see a massive increase in the number of companies that entered this space.
Yeah.
Not just upstart companies with no background, but companies that were in other spaces that decided to tiptoe over into the healthcare staffing space.
Yep.
And a lot of times the idea and the best way to grow is by taking a couple really thin years, right? Well, interest rates have changed so dramatically over the last year that the cost of cash has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
A lot of these companies had budgeted around a certain amount of an interest rate that they were going to have to pay on the money they were borrowing versus the amount of cash that was coming in from their receivables, the amount of nurses that they placed.
Yep.
On average now, hospitals are paying a little over 90 days out. You do a 13-week contract, do the quick math on that. 13 weeks, 7 days a week. Contract's over before the company gets paid for the first week of work being done.
Exactly.
Right? And you're paying interest on that cash. That first week payroll, you're paying 12 weeks interest. The next week, 12 weeks. The next week, 12 weeks.
Yep.
That's a real financial burden to the company. And so there are some of these pop-up companies, these companies that are of the mindset of growth at all costs, that could be in a really, really bad position. So,
yeah,
one of the things I think we're going to continue to see throughout the industry this year, mergers, acquisitions, and maybe even a few more takeovers, not just the friendly mergers, the friendly sales, the sales out of necessity.
Because I couldn't cover a payroll kind of
Yeah, I mean,
sale,
we've seen
right?
some of the chat rooms, things have popped up recently.
Absolutely.
My company couldn't make payroll. What am I supposed to do?
What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, it's a bad spot, but I think you could see a few more of those. Fortunately, I cannot imagine a world where that's going to be Atlas, but
It's not.
It is.
It absolutely isn't.
It is
So
out there.
we have been we've been smart about it. Not because we think we're smarter than everybody else. There's a very conservative route to growth, right?
Very Midwest, very Berkshire Hathaway, very Warren Buffett.
Absolutely. Pay down your debt. Be conservative. Don't go after those big contracts. On the other side of that, they're saying SIA is saying that we could see up to a 20% decline in the industry. Where's the majority of that going to come from? It's from the COVID clinics that don't exist anymore, right? It's those big government contracts that don't exist anymore, where maybe some of the other players out there made a lot of money off of those, right? During the pandemic. That's gone now.
Yeah, that was one and done.
Yep. So be careful. Be careful while you're out there. Understand who you're working for, where they came from, how long they've been around, how quickly they've grown. Now, we grew very quickly too.
Absolutely.
But we grew quickly during different times.
Cost of cash was way different.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, again, just my opinion, but understand who you work for. It feels like in just a couple months we're going to be on an airplane doing this all over again, which we will.
I am on an airplane here in 2 more weeks.
That's true. That is true.
I'm not done.
Maybe not as much for me, but when we go on the road, this is how frugal Atlas is. We share a room.
We do.
And this guy snores, so
significantly.
Yeah, so do I. So that's just how it goes. 2 queen beds, it works out just fine. We're okay.
We make it work.
Steve, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here with me. So if you have any questions about this or you want to understand more about the industry, I'd be happy to talk about it. I know Steve would be happy to talk about it too. We'll put both of our email addresses right down here. Shoot us a message, and we'd be happy to share any details, answer any questions you might have about maybe the nuts and bolts, the back end of how an agency works, or why do we go to these types of conferences. I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Probably created more questions than we answered, but we at least tried.
That's, you know what, the more questions we can answer, the better the industry is.
Truth.
There you go.
All right.
We'll see you next week.